College football playoff is upon us, and Joe, we have our 4 teams: Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. I can't believe they left out Florida State. I just look, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off the wound here. I can't believe it. But listen, we were on Twitter a lot last night. We even did a Twitter Spaces about this. I think I was the only one in the room. We had hundreds and hundreds of people that came into Twitter Spaces last night, and I would continue to say one thing, and I think you kind of echoed there at the end. They were never going to leave out the SEC champ, and especially when you read the criteria that you posted on Twitter last night in reference to key players being out, they were never going to put in Florida State over a one-loss SEC champ. It wasn't going to happen.
Well, I actually am going to push back on the notion of that their decision-making was, we can't leave out an SEC team. Yes, I think that that's definitely absolutely important because you want to represent the most competitive, most talented conference in college football. But for me, what this signaled, and I said the minute I came in the space, without really knowing the entire guidelines and going on their website, like one of our listeners, I believe his name was Tim. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I knew coming into this that they emphasized strength of schedule, head-to-head matchups of similar opponents, conference championships. And when I was paying close attention to that, that signaled to me that they were going to go with Florida State. But as soon as Tim brought up and sent us the link, and I screen grabbed it and I posted it on Twitter, that the additional criteria that I had no idea was there. I don't even know if this has been there the entire time or if this was added this week in order for this situation. But that final criteria of other relevant factors such as unavailability of key players and coaches that may have affected a team's performance during the season or likely will affect its postseason performance. I think that they saw what happened yesterday with a third-string quarterback. Although Tate Rodemaker would have been the player in the college football playoff, they said to themselves, we can't trot out a team that is going to get their asses kicked because we don't know what their situation is like at quarterback. I think if Rodemaker played in the ACC championship game and played a decent game, there might have been a little bit more of a debate here. But we all know that because of that massive question mark, the product during the playoff would not have been good. And us as college football fans, what is fair is different from what is a competitive environment. And Florida State does not fit that criteria.
So let's walk through, the arguments for both, meaning Alabama and Florida State. I'll start with Florida State. It is, regardless of Jordan Travis being out, you are an undefeated Power 5 conference champion, regardless of how it looked. You went undefeated in a P5 league, right?
Yeah.
If anybody would have done that, they probably should have deserved being in. And it's not even, Joe, I've been hearing all last night, all day yesterday, and all day this morning. Well, who deserves what? It's not deserved. They went out there and earned it. Last night's defensive performance by Florida State, they earned to be undefeated. Right? Like, it's not as if that they went out there and they didn't earn every win that they had. But like I said last night, Alabama's only loss is to the number 3 team in the country. And losses and wins aren't created equally. Alabama's strength of schedule, Joe, at the end was number 5. They had the 5th toughest schedule in the country. Florida State was 55. And I know that if you're going to split hairs, if you play 5 top 15 teams, like what Alabama did, you went 4-1 against them and you beat the number 1 team in the country in a neutral site. And let's call it what it is. It's not neutral site. That game is in Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
Okay. So when it's all said and done, do I feel bad for Florida State? Yes, I feel bad for Florida State. Bama deserves it just as much as, I know it doesn't bother me that Bama's got a loss to the number 3 team in the playoff, right? It does not bother me because of one team throughout the entire year played a tougher schedule than Florida State. Joe, this isn't mine. Y'all just saw it on ESPN.
Yeah, yes.
55 strength of schedule, okay? I hate it for both. I hate it for Florida State, but I do understand the logic, and people are going to hate me for that, and I get it. But Joe, like you mentioned just a minute ago too, the best team of the two got in. Like, let's not
in the current the best two of the current state that they're in, because I think that if Jordan Travis was still available, I don't think there actually would have been a debate. I think they would have been in 1,000%.
Correct, but you get what?
Yes.
Okay, let me clarify. Obviously, I mean the two best teams right now. Alabama is the better team, and they went with the better team.
Yeah, and the one thing that also benefits Alabama's circumstance right now here is that their most important win of the season comes in the SEC championship game,
No
and
doubt.
they have their conference championship. This isn't like last year or in years past where Ohio State has gotten a pass with one loss or whatever circumstance that has helped aid them getting into the playoff without winning a conference championship. That's why I think that this debate is so more divisive than it typically is because of the fact that all of these teams – I don't even think this has ever happened where all 5 teams that won their conference, the Power 5 conferences, were available and in contention to be in the college football playoff. This has never happened. And that's why I don't think that they're necessarily, this is an answer that I think that no Florida State fan wants, but there was no wrong answer. There really is no wrong answer. There are 2 different arguments, and they chose one argument over the other argument. There is not an incorrect decision here. They just had to make a really tough choice. And we give the committee tons of shit for making mistakes all of the time. But plain and simple, this was an impossible decision. This was impossible to make the right choice.
Can I be honest with you? As bad as I hate it for Florida State, I don't think it's a tough decision. Like we were saying last night in the Twitter spaces, okay? There's 3 things that I kept thinking about the entire day. You ready? Okay, even though I told you I got the phone call, okay? And that's why I completely changed my tune midway through the day. Number one, this is a business. And what they're not going to do is they're not going to let Michigan and Florida State go all the way out there to Pasadena and let Florida State get their teeth kicked in. That they're not going to, regardless of what you think about Florida State defensively. Joe, they had what, 8 punts in the first half, 7 punts, whatever ridiculous number it was.
Yeah.
They punted the ball 7 times, 6 times, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, however many it was in the first half. Joe, if they do that against Michigan, they're going to get their teeth kicked in. You know.
Well, wait, can I throw this in there though?
Yeah.
I don't think Tate Rodemaker is. I think he's pretty close to Kyle McCord. So I really don't know if that.
Well, glad you brought that up, Joe. They did the same thing against Florida in his first start. And I got to be honest, okay? Oh, I'm just going to be real. When's the last time that we've seen a kid that go into concussion protocol didn't come out? I have in a week. I mean, we literally saw Jane Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner, do it literally against Florida. Here's another, like, Florida State fans are going to kill me on this. Joe, you saw the text or I don't know if I showed you this text message, but
no.
The Rodemaker kid, they were complaining that he had a broken non-throwing hand. Remember the Florida week? Like
yeah, dude, actually did send me that.
You know, so again, you can say whatever you want about Rodemaker. They're not going to win that football game.
I also want to just throw this into the mix, and I said this a second ago. I think that if Rodemaker, I still don't really know the true pronunciation of his name. If he had played in this game and he had played slightly better than he did against Florida, I think that this would be a much more contentious argument, because then we could say the backup might be in, but look, they play. I actually really think that if Rodemaker played, they would have smoked Louisville. I think that they would have blown past them, considering how much they won by, with the limitations of a kid who had no intention of ever stepping on the field at Florida State. That kid looked like he was there just to smoke weed and go to frat parties that played in that game yesterday.
Hey, don't make fun of mustache Brock Glenn, okay?
I'm not making fun of him, but that kid did not look like he wanted to be playing in that football game, and he didn't look fully prepared. It's a difficult circumstance. I give him credit for getting the win, but he didn't provide any value for them to win that game, and they won by 10 points. I think that they would have won by 15, 20 plus if Rodemaker was in that game, and I think that if Rodemaker does play and they kick their ass, the committee doesn't really have as much of an argument to say, well, we don't want to stick Florida State in without Jordan Travis, because then we do have a Cardale Jones type possible situation.
Well,
it's a big if, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, let's not go. That's what I'm about to say. Let's not go down the Cardale Jones rabbit hole. But I just vehemently disagree. But I'm gonna look. I'm not trying to throw shade at you, okay?
I know.
What I'm about to say. But I am gonna throw shade on everybody that got on my ass throughout the year. No pause. I kept telling everybody, do not count out Alabama. That there is a strong possibility. Joe, we talked about this on Monday. I said there was going to be a 3-point game against Georgia. Over the last month, I'll just say 6 weeks. Joe, they are the best 4 teams in the country, playing like one of the best 4. I get what you say about Auburn. I get that. But regardless of the Auburn win, okay, in the last second heroic type, you need luck. Florida State fans should know this because Auburn, when they got into the national title game, they had some luck against Georgia with a tip pass catch, the kick 6. Their teams sometimes, like I remember as an LSU fan, remember the Thaddeus Moss catch along the sidelines when you have to have luck. Some of that's going to happen. But when you run the football and play great defense the way that they do, Joe, we had not seen Carson Beck all year long. And this was my number one thing throughout the week about Alabama and what I think that they can do. What they just did to Carson Beck, which nobody else in the country could do so far, they literally beat I think they showed that it doesn't matter who lines up against them. Joe, this is a horrible matchup for Michigan. Horrible.
I actually disagree on that, but just very quickly, Alabama's performance was fantastic, and I give them credit for playing the way that they did in the most important situation for them to have played. But we do still have to acknowledge that if Brock Bowers was fully healthy and Ladd McConkey were fully healthy, like Ladd McConkey couldn't even separate in this game. Like he had a lot of trouble moving. I don't think that was
What's the difference of them not being able to run the football though?
They knew it was coming. They knew that they had to run the ball in order to establish their offense.
But it also doesn't change the fact that he missed wide open receivers when he had them open. I get your argument. I fully get your argument. He's also missing wide ass open dudes, and they're missing blocks.
I know we're gonna end up recapping that game.
Yeah, we're gonna do that tonight live at 6. Y'all better be there live 6 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I was gonna say though that I don't think that this is necessarily a bad matchup for Michigan. I think that these are 2 very evenly matched teams simply for the fact that Michigan's defensive line, separate from Florida State, I think it's the most talented and it's the deepest in the country. And what is going to be necessary to slow down Jalen Milroe is an athletic, aggressive defensive line that has very talented edge defenders and very talented linebackers. I think that Georgia missing out on having Jamon Dumas-Johnson, which I applauded the backups that stepped in for him, but not having him really killed their ability to spy him and hold him in check. I look at Junior Colson and the rest of that linebacker core for Michigan. I think that they've got the bodies to maybe slow him down a little bit more. It's going to be a really close game. I'm not going to sit here and put my foot in my mouth and say that Alabama's going to get boat raced again. I'm not afraid to sit here and say that it is going to be a tough game. Alabama fans already hate me, so I don't care anymore. But I think that Michigan is going to put up a legitimate fight. It all depends on how J.J. McCarthy plays in order for them to win that game.
We'll talk about that. We have a long time to talk about that. But, Joe, any other thing from the committee? So just to reemphasize, I'm sure you all know this, but it's 1 Michigan, 2 Washington, 3 Texas, 4 Alabama. Let me ask you this question because we talked a lot about Alabama. We talked a lot about Florida State. Are you surprised that Texas is at number 3?
No, I think this circumstance was created the second that Alabama won the SEC championship game because the argument for them was always going to be, look, they beat Alabama at home. A 2-loss Alabama team would not have been very exciting for Texas, but the fact that they beat the SEC champion at home earlier on in the season justifies them being placed at 3. I think out of the 4 teams, they played the weakest schedule, and I think that they have benefited from playing in the Big 12 in a year that it was down. What's their next best win? Oklahoma State, Kansas with a backup quarterback? It's a very mediocre schedule, and we're going to find out if they are legitimately competitive and if that win in week 2 is replicable later on in the season. But I don't hate that decision. It makes sense because you had to justify putting Alabama in, and the only way that you justify it is putting Texas at 3.
So I agree. I think the biggest point that you make there, okay, is you can't justify putting in Alabama without Texas.
Mm-hmm.
But like you just mentioned, Alabama's the best win that they have. Now that's a massive win, right? Like that's a massive win. But your next toughest game that you played on a neutral site, you lost in Oklahoma, right? Like I mean, so look, I think that we get a rematch. Okay, Washington versus Texas. It was actually a game that you
the Alamo Bowl.
The Alamo Bowl, right? We talked about that game more than any bowl game in the creation of Ruffino and Joe show because you were so on Washington.
The hilarity of it is we both were so down on both of those teams at different points, and here we are. They're competing with one another in the college football
completely.
playoff.
But I will tell you, I think that they have the least. What's the word I'm looking for? The worst resume.
Yeah.
Getting in. Okay.
Yeah.
But Joe, what they did at 11 a.m. yesterday, we said it was going to be a splattering. If they wanted to, if they really wanted to, they could have put up 70 against Oklahoma State. And they took the pedal off the metal. They're putting in Arch Manning there at the end. By the way, every time Arch Manning gets in the game, they're undefeated. Okay, just throwing that out there. But look, they look like one of the more dominant teams in college football after what they did yesterday, and you just could not justify not putting them in. You brought up an interesting point yesterday, though. Should Washington be above Michigan?
Yeah, I really wanted to bring that up. Just a random side thought because I get distracted by the TV being on in the background. I don't think Nick Saban's smiled all season long, and he's smiling right now on ESPN, and it's really disturbing.
Oh, as soon as he won, I watched his post-game. I watched his post-game press conference. My man was grinning. He knew.
Oh, man.
As soon as he won, he knew.
Okay, well, regardless. Washington, though, I'm actually a little bit peeved. I'm really annoyed. I think that Washington has the best argument. They have the best resume. I just don't understand. Why do we justify putting Michigan at number 1? I don't even think that there is a supportive argument to say that Michigan belongs at number 1. Washington, I know that you and I get in these debates that they played close games against Arizona State and against Stanford. But at the end of the day, they've got a ton of ranked wins. They beat Oregon twice, one of the best teams, a top 10 team in the country twice. And I argue that that is more impressive than beating 2 separate top 10 teams because we talk about all the time, it is impossible to beat a good team 2 times in one season. So for them to accomplish that on the most important, possibility, capability, I think that deserves recognition. It does help them, though, that I think that they match up very well against Texas and that this is a very favorable situation for them to get the win.
I'm going to disagree with you on one massive thing. If Michigan would have lost or not lost, if Michigan would have won against teams like, let me give an example. If they would have beaten Michigan State 21-17, I'd been like, okay, right? Like, all right, I put them ahead of them. I know, Joe, that, and we'll talk about this tonight on our live show. I get that there were games that they had the flu. Okay, but you didn't really have it against Stanford. And you know what? Washington State, even though that's a rivalry game, if you're going to, look at down the stretch, I think that they played a tougher Maryland team. Okay, they play tougher teams down the stretch.
Maryland sucks.
Okay, but Stanford or Maryland? You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm not talking about the conference championship game, them playing Oregon. Outside of Oregon, Washington just kind of, what's the word I want? Just kind of pussyfooted around a little bit.
Make sure you check out Bet Online for all of your sports betting needs. For anything that I do betting related, I go on over to betonline.ag and I use promo code BELIEVE50. BetOnline has all of the latest updated odds for the NFL and college football seasons. Anything you need, whether it's futures, live in-game betting, no matter what, your football betting needs are met at BetOnline. And again, make sure you use that promo code BELIEVE50, BLEAV50 to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. They're gamers. That's what I've said all season long. They're a team that plays down in their competition.
I don't care that they're gamers. Okay, if you're going to split hairs, okay, really and truthfully, it doesn't really matter, right? Because to me, I don't know if I wouldn't want to play Texas more than I wouldn't want to play. You know why, Joe? If I'm Washington, I think that this is the best overall scenario for Washington to be at 2. Can I tell you why? And why they shouldn't complain. Texas is 100th in the country. And by the way, Texas fans rip me alive. Okay.
They don't want to check the numbers.
Your stats are wrong. And this is my favorite quote. You ready? You fat piece of shit is what one Texas fan said. And so then they go on social media and say, well, here's the stat. Joe, they're 90th plus in passing yards allowed. Their secondary has not been good. So I know you could say you should want them to be there, but if I'm watching, I'm saying, hey, brother, keep me at 2. Just let me play Texas because they're of all of these teams, Texas has the worst secondary.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I think that's a really good point to bring up. That they do benefit here from getting a favorable situation because we saw what they offensively did against Oregon, and Oregon's secondary is better than Texas. So this is a very favorable situation. But I still point to, if we're just talking separate from them getting a beneficial situation, it sucks that they don't get to play close to home in the Rose Bowl. But if we're just comparing the two,
they'll make Washington go.
They are. I'm pretty sure that they are. They're making them go to New Orleans to play the Sugar Bowl. I'm pretty sure that was.
Oh, I might go to that game. I might wear. Never mind.
You should. You might not make it out of there alive, man. The Washington fans are going to find your ass.
With Washington fans.
But if we're comparing and we're just talking about if we think that these ordering of rankings are correct, I still look at the fact that the 3 best wins for Michigan are Ohio State, Penn State, and then the next closest is Iowa, which was unjustifiably ranked as high as they were. And then we go down further the list. It's Maryland, Rutgers. Is that who we're going to go with? I look at the fact that Washington 1 has a comparable opponent where they both dominated Michigan State. And then on top of that, they have 2 wins against Oregon. They have a win against Utah. They have a win against Oregon State, and they have a win against Arizona. Those are more impressive victories for me, and I get it. Close wins against bad teams are noticeable, but they're still wins, and we can't discredit them. Them being 13-0 with more ranked wins against more impressive ranked teams, to me, is more worthy of being number 1 than Michigan being number 1.
Only thing I will say, I think it's tougher to overcome what Michigan did with their head coach being out for 6 games in the regular season and all the shizite that they had to put up with. Okay. And they continue to overcome every single week. And look, everybody says, well, look what they did against Iowa. Joe, can I tell you? I don't care because I know what that Iowa defense is about. Did you see the play, by the way, when the long return from Michigan happened? The kid, number 4, misses the tackle and tracks him down. By the way, that's the fastest white boy that's ever existed in the history of life.
Well, Cooper DeJean wasn't playing, man. Cooper DeJean's fast.
I don't care. Whoever number 4 is the fastest white kid on planet Earth, okay? Nevertheless, I don't think that they got it wrong. Joe, to kind of wrap up our point here on our college football playoff reaction before we go live at 6, can I tell you something that really bugs the absolute dog manure out of me?
Yeah.
Next year, this won't matter.
I don't know if that bugs me. I get why it might bug you, but I don't know if that bugs me. I think that this is honestly, I think this is a nice way to transition.
It's going to devalue the regular season.
I don't think that it does, though, because look, if we look further down into the top 12, I think that there is now there's going to be more contention for those last couple of spots. And I think that this is the perfect year to transition to that because we can sit here and say, we missed out on an opportunity to see Ohio State play in the college football playoff and upset somebody. We missed the opportunity to see Georgia seek redemption. We missed the opportunity to see Oregon and Penn State to possibly seek redemption. I think all of those teams were good enough, Missouri even, to come in and upset somebody in the first round. I think this is the perfect transition with how close the debate was.
All right, let me ask you this question because we have not talked about them yet. Georgia went from number 1 in the country to number 6.
Mm-hmm.
I got to be real with you. I think that that's horseshit.
Is it though?
Yeah, it is.
Here's
I
the only thing. Go ahead. I'm cutting you off.
Okay. I think leaving out Georgia is not a problem. I don't have a problem with leaving Georgia out. Okay. But they ain't the sixth best team in the country.
I agree.
The problem with all of this is you and I both know that if it came to them playing Washington, Michigan, maybe not Michigan, but Washington, Texas, Florida State, the chances of them winning are really high. Okay, like very high. And you would probably pick them over those teams. Joe, is there a team not named Alabama, even in a rematch against Alabama? Is there any team in the country that you would pick over Georgia right now?
No, and I would also argue that if you gave them a month to get fully healthy and Amarius Mims comes back and everybody is not dealing with massive dings and important body parts, they are far and away the best team in the country. But that doesn't happen. And the committee has to draw a line in the sand. They already did Florida State dirty, as we're talking about here, and moving them back. They can't do them even further by pushing them to 6 and Georgia to 5 just because they're Georgia. We can't do that. We can't just make that move because they're the SEC and they were at one point the best team in the country.
It has nothing to do with them being a part of the SEC. And you admitted by your own volition that you would take them over Michigan, Washington, Texas, and again against Alabama. Right? That's your own volition that you're making. And here's another thing.
But that's not what the conversation is, though. We still have to count them not winning their conference. They get pushed back behind the other 5 teams that did win their conference.
Let me ask you a question. And I'm gonna stir the hornet's nest. Can I just be real with you?
Yeah.
Winning the Pac-12, in my opinion, is bigger than what people are giving it credit for. Okay. Is it bigger than what the Big Ten did? Because I can make the argument that Georgia played and beat tougher teams than Michigan did.
Okay, this is where I think you and I start to go off on completely different angles here, because at the end of the day, the games are played on the field. We can't just at the end of the season after 13 games, and it was the whole Alabama thing last year where you and I got into so many heated arguments of Alabama had 2 losses and they deserve to be in because they played a far more difficult schedule. You still have to succeed in that schedule. You still have to succeed and win a certain amount of games. I understand that, but we can't discredit. It's really freaking hard to go undefeated and to win your conference. It is really freaking hard. And Georgia had the opportunity to do that, and they failed. And that has to be acknowledged and recognized.
The 2-time defending national champion.
They still failed. And Washington succeeded.
Let me ask you a God's honest question. Who do you think had a tougher schedule, Georgia or Michigan?
Georgia obviously did, because the Big Ten
Georgia obviously did. Okay. Joe, they played 5 ranked opponents in the last 6 weeks.
But it's not just based on schedule and strength of schedule. A key factor in this conversation has to be winning the conference.
Can I stop you right there? Then why did you just put Alabama in?
Because they won their conference.
Oh, but so did Florida State. And they're undefeated. So my point is, you literally just set the precedent.
But Florida State doesn't get in because of a completely different reason that we spent a lot of time breaking down. The injury issue.
Sure, but like I just said, I'm not saying put them in the playoff. What I'm saying is they're the 5th best team, and you can make the argument that if you're going with the best teams, they deserve to be in.
If we're going off of that argument, but again, we can't just ignore there are 5 teams that won their conferences that are good enough to go to the playoff. Those teams have to be recognized before Georgia, simply for the
I don't disagree with
the
that.
quality of the product of doing that. It's difficult to do that.
But everything Georgia went through is better, in my opinion, than what Michigan had to go through from an on-field standpoint. Joe, they had two ranked teams. They had two ranked teams they had to play. Take the teams out of it for a minute.
Okay.
Take the teams out of it for a minute. If I told you that one team played 5 ranked opponents at the time that they played them in the last 6 weeks, and one team only played 1.
It goes with what Booger said.
Excuse me, 2.
Yeah. It goes with what Booger said that I quote tweeted yesterday.
Don't use an LSU guy against me. Don't you dare use an LSU guy against me.
I'm about to. At the end of the day, this isn't a beauty pageant. The eye test does factor into this, and I think that it is a key qualifier when making these debates on, small incremental changes. But we have to use the results in the field. This isn't Cincinnati. We're not sitting here trying to make the debate for Cincinnati getting in over some of these teams. We're talking about Power 5 champions and a team that did not win their conference that's a Power 5 team. Yes, they went through a gauntlet. Yes, they went through the SEC. Yes, they have one of the most talented teams in the country, but they lost. And that has to be acknowledged. They didn't win their conference. I don't think we won't agree on this, but
we're not. We're categorically not. Now, look, next year, this doesn't matter. You have a 12-team playoff, and you know what? Listen to me before we get out of here. Okay, Joe, I want you to please, God, clip this, okay? At some point, listen to your buddy Blake, okay? Next year when we have the playoff, Georgia, let's just throw – I know they're not at 5 right now, but just humor me for just a minute, okay? Georgia will be number 5 next year if this scenario were to play out. And, Joe, guess who they're going to play?
Is it Liberty?
Liberty. And you're going to make the argument to me.
Oh, man.
Okay, so y'all all want to go to 12-team playoffs, and you want one group of 5 team in there. And, by the way, Georgia just lost. Georgia just lost, and you're going to have to do that. Let me tell you, if an SEC team is number 5, or let's just say it's Ohio State when they're up and going, or Michigan, whoever it is, those group of 5 teams are going to get their asses absolutely kicked.
Yeah, they don't belong, I think, in the world
belong there.
When that qualifier was – go ahead.
1 second. If you have a team like Cincinnati – in the year that they got in, where they play 3 Power 5 teams and go 3-0, okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
And Liberty didn't play anyone.
Huh?
Liberty didn't play anyone.
Correct. And if you remember, Cincinnati, when it was all said and done, beat more ranked teams than what Alabama did that year, right? Like, they played and beat more ranked teams that year. My only point is, Cincinnati is a what's the word? They're a outlier. They are the outlier they're the exception to the rule. So I'm just going to say this on the December the 3rd, the year 2023 of our Lord Jesus Christ. Please, God, next year when this comes out and you got to play number 5 Georgia has to play number 12 Liberty, good luck.
Just to close that out as we're wrapping this up, it's stupid that qualifier is even in there, because when it was put in, it was really before NIL and the transfer portal has been at its full strength. We will never, ever get a G5 team that is anywhere close to as well-rounded as that Cincinnati team. And that Cincinnati team was barely good enough to be justified being in the college football playoff. Anytime a team puts together a good roster, it will get picked apart piece by piece by other programs with more money. It's just the reality that we live in. Those guys are all going to transfer out. Sauce Gardner does not stick around at Cincinnati. Sauce Gardner ends up at Florida State or Alabama in the current state of college football.
Very true. All right, we'll see y'all at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. See you soon. I feel bad for Florida State, but Joe, did they get it right?
I guess.
I think they got it right. All right, see y'all soon. Peace.